So we're going to, with that, move on to the Q&A. We've had quite a few questions, but if you haven't had a chance yet, there's still time. So please just pop your question in the questions box and we'll get on to it. Okay, so I'll just get started. So the first question was for Ben. It was asking, when the user is completing an assessment section, are they able to include figures and graphs in the comment box, or is it only text?
So it's only text. There was a bit of chat, and a lot of people, or a few people, requested that ability to put in figures and tables, etc., which would be definitely the case in something like the WES program. But it's just text for the first version of it. But it would be very easily added. It just wasn't high enough up the priority list, unfortunately.
Yep, thank you. And then, perhaps if future versions of DTOceanPlus are released, that might be something that we consider as we go.
And just to add, I think that kind of improvement is something that will sit nicely alongside the continuing development of the rest of the OES framework, for example. As we add detail to that process and more funders choose to take that process up, there'll be other improvements, no doubt, to the capabilities of the tool to suit those.
Yep, absolutely. And so moving on to our next question, we kind of touched on this. Is there any indication that certification bodies and insurances will integrate this framework into their activities? So that conversation has already started within the consortium of DTOceanPlus, because we can see this tool as being something that would be useful as a sort of pre-certification to make sure that developers have completed everything that's necessary to complete before they even work towards certification, and to keep that nice consistency in technology development. No word of insurances yet, but like Jonathan's mentioned about the IEA framework and getting this sort of international consensus, then I feel like the more people who adopt the evaluation areas and the different metrics, and we get that standardization, then perhaps that will be a natural flow of things. Don't know if you want to add anything, Jonathan.
It's a question that we also get from certification bodies who are keen for people to use their processes more widely, obviously. And there's real value in that for everybody. If everybody uses those certification processes, then it's a route into investment, and it's a route into insurance, and that's a route into investment. And I think these activities can all complement each other really nicely, because we are aligned with hopefully widening government expectation or international funder expectation of what activities should be delivered and how the information should be presented. If we then align with certification bodies, then we basically present a route to wider uptake of certification processes, because if government funders expect it, then people will follow. And we present an easy route for international funders, national funders, and certification bodies to kind of interact on that.
Yeah, it's a very good point, because I often think of these tools as being really useful to technology developers and to funders, but actually there's benefit to certification bodies as well, and people uptaking consistent methods. Thank you for that. Okay, the next question I'm going to pass to Donald. So the question is, I'm particularly interested by the logistics and marine operations module. The ports database will be available at the end of August. So will the ports database be available at the end of August? What do you think, Donald?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that doesn't relate specifically to the StageGate tool, but in order to use the StageGate tool in assessing a project, you need the context, including things like sites and so on. So as part of the suite of tools, we are developing a set of open source data, which will include components such as electrical cables to be used in the energy delivery module, and there will also be a database of vessels and ports and operations for those, and they will be used to allow the logistics marine operations tool to run. but we will be releasing them as independent data sets that can be used in other tools or other contexts as an open source data set at the end of the project. And there will be details of that will be posted on the DTOceanPlus website.
Fine, thank you, Donald.
Can I just jump in there? Donald just reminded me of something, of a real value of the tool set that we've not mentioned, I don't think, in this training session. And that was when you mentioned bringing in the context, particularly as an example for a funder like us at Wave Energy Scotland. We're interested in not only funding whole wave energy devices, but also the subsystems within it. And it's sometimes quite difficult to compare a hydraulic power takeoff against a direct electrical generator when they're very different technologies. And one of the real values of DTOceanPlus is that it enables you to put your power takeoff in a simulated device, in a simulated wave energy converter or a tidal energy converter, put that in a small farm and be able to use that consistent integration between two different candidate technologies. So you could kind of see how your PTO works in a device and compare that against a different PTO in a similar device in a similar deployment. So that addition of the context of the device you're in and the farm you're in is a really good tool for us investors like Wave Energy Scotland to be able to compare technologies, and also for technology developers to be able to start that conversation with future farm developers, future project developers.
Yeah, it's a very good point, because at the end of the day, it's a suite of design tools, and it's that supporting design that could provide that consistent backdrop for subsystems, like you say. So, yeah, thank you for raising that. So another question we have is about the evaluation areas themselves. So I'll attempt to answer this, Jonathan, and feel free to jump in. So where did they come from, and why have we decided on them? The evaluation areas are something that have been in evolution for quite a few years. So in the Wave Energy Scotland programme, we essentially have the same evaluation areas, but they're kind of grouped in slightly different ways. We've run a series of workshops internationally with different stakeholders in the sector, and we decided on this list of 10 as being the key areas which have an impact on the sort of performance and success of your wave energy project or your wave and tidal energy project. So it was kind of decided on essentially before DTOceanPlus began, and then we've incorporated all of that learnings into the tool, and that's where those 10 key areas came from. Don't know if you want to add anything, Jonathan.
Yeah, I think you've covered it all there. I think the link between the two projects is a really strong one, and each can help promote the other one. And we're keen to promote the recommendations of the OES framework amongst international funders and try and spread that consensus across the world, such that technologies can become even more mobile, and it's easier for technologies to engage in export activities and move around the world.
Thank you. And on a sort of similar thread, since we're talking about evaluation areas, questions come in about essentially doesn't it all come down to cost? So almost why are we bothering with everything else? So this is probably something everyone's got some thoughts on. But at the end of the day, the StageGate design tool is trying to take this holistic view of all the different evaluation areas, because you could have really low capex, and then your reliability or survivability could be terrible. So the idea is when you have your StageGate report at the end, you've got your big list of metrics and answers, you've got an overall view of your technology, which in particular at early stages, when you may not have completed any open water testing, it's good to have as much information as possible, and sometimes that is not quantitative, and that's what we're trying to capture, is all of the information you can at that relevant stage. So yes, we agree that cost is important, but there's lots of other factors that are important too.
And sometimes at really early stages, I think you just said the quantitative information simply isn't available, and the justification that goes alongside that is, to a funder at early stages, almost as important as the number itself, and how that technology developer intends to improve their technology and how they intend to develop it is equally important, if not more important, at early stages.
Great. We have a question about standards. So we've touched on this a fair bit because we've been talking about the OES framework is obviously the stages have been based on the IEC standards. So just to kind of summarise again, the stage gate design tool's got 6 stages going from 0 to 5. And these align with the IEC standards, which are in 62600 103. However, we have split the very first IEC stage up into 2 because we've created this sort of stage 0, and the idea behind that was that we can look at even earlier stage technology as kind of like low as you can go, but we've essentially aligned with the standards that we can see exist, and as for the other modules in DTOceanPlus, I think standards have been aligned to as far as they exist and as far as possible, and they don't always exist in the ocean energy sector for everything. But for example, energy delivery has considered standards like subsea power cables and shallow water, renewable energy applications. This is from DNV, and aligned with them as far as is practical. So we're aware of them and we've done our research and we've kind of done our best in that area. Would you like to add anything to that, Donald?
Thanks, Julian. I was just about to mention that, yes, several of the modules are using standards from bodies such as DNV, where specific international standards don't yet exist. But the development of both the 62600 Part 103, but also the Part 200, which is coming out for tidal devices, is also being considered. So we should be clear that it's although the StageGate tool was developed by Wave Energy Scotland, it's applicable to both wave and tidal technologies.
Thank you. Okay, good. And we've got a question about thresholds. So we touched on this, but we didn't dwell too much because I think this is something we've spoken about in previous webinars a fair bit. But just to kind of reiterate, we don't put thresholds for any metrics pre-built into the tool, because I think that would be incredibly difficult to set any thresholds. Even levelized cost of electricity could be debatable on what you would put as your threshold for that, depending on the stage of technology development. But what we do allow is the user can put in their own threshold, so that might be useful for, say, a technology developer might have certain goals in mind for reliability based on their previous experience, and that could be something that they want to keep in the tool as a threshold so they can see that pass fail, but they are entirely defined by the user. Okay, I think we are coming to the end of our questions. I've just got one here about documentation and support that's been provided with the tools. So we do have tutorials and how-to guides, which will be available alongside the tools when you download them. And this website will be available with these webinars, which are recorded. Am I missing anything? I think the idea is as you use the tools and go along, we've also got as much help as we could in terms of pop-up boxes and that kind of thing. It's something that when we're in the early stages of development of the tool, it was be clear that it was really helpful to have that definitions along the side. So hopefully there's enough documentation there.
Gillian, if I could just add in there on the documentation that we have been developing this alongside the tools, not just for kind of the end users that will download it in August, but also for our validation partners, and they have been using the tutorials and how-to guides that we have written in order to test the development versions of the tools and giving us feedback on those tutorials so we can hopefully improve them further.
Yeah, that's a really fair point. Thank you. Just had a question about site characterization tools. So I think we're getting some general DTOceanPlus questions. With site characterization, they're asking if it can be different sites around the world, and the answer is yes. So like with the rest of the tools, site characterization works with different levels of complexity, and at its lowest level complexity, you can choose low, medium or high energy sites for wave or tidal energy, and at the highest level complexity, the user can actually upload their own resource data. So essentially, yes, you're not restricted to where you are in the world when you want to use the tools. Okay, so I think we're out of questions now, unless anyone's got anything else. Donald, did you want to
I
add
would
something?
just add maybe onto that if you want more details about site characterization module, then the previous training session that we held last week should be available on the DTOceanPlus website shortly, and you'll be able to watch that back if you missed it.
Perfect, thank you. And yeah, in due course, this will be available alongside that too. So plenty on the website to look at if you have any questions alongside our different deliverables you can navigate. Okay, so I think with that we'll round up then, and I'd like to say that we're actually going to be holding a final workshop for DTOceanPlus on the 31st of August, and that's from 2:30 to 3:30 Central European time, and there'll be a live Q&A at that time as well. So if there's anything else that comes up, please feel free to get in contact, email us, and with that I'll say thank you and speak to you soon.